Get up front and center.
Did you really want to?
I'll put myself up. Go on.
Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, January 11th. We are being recorded by WestCat. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to start with a brief synopsis of where Danielle has been and why she's Just joking. Glad you're here. All right, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we'll start right away. We started 5 minutes late, but that's okay, with the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you.
I had mentioned that already. But we are being recorded, true.
So I'm starting tonight with a student recognition. So we have with us a junior at Westwood High School, Noah Stone. I'll ask Noah to come up in a moment, but feel free to stay seated for the time being. We've invited Noah here tonight to recognize him. He recently participated in the All National Ensembles, which is sponsored by the National Association of Music Education. And I want to tell you a little bit about how that happened. So in order to participate in this festival, which is obviously quite prestigious, the process actually began last year when Noah auditioned for Eastern District Ensembles in Massachusetts, and he was selected on the bass clarinet to participate in the festival at the district level. He then scored highly enough to get recommended to audition for Massachusetts All-State Ensembles. And after that successful audition, he was selected for the All-State Ensembles on bass clarinet, participated in the festival last March, and that culminated with a performance at Symphony Hall. With his All-State acceptance, Noah was qualified to audition for the All Nationals Ensembles. So in the spring, he video recorded the audition materials, and he and Dr. Cody, our performing arts director, sent them into the national office. He was notified over the summer that he was accepted as first chair bass clarinet in the All National Band. So this past November, Noah traveled to Walt Disney World in Orlando to participate in the festival. He is only the third student ever from Westwood High School to participate in the All National Ensembles, and he is the only Westwood High School student who was accepted 2 years in a row. That's quite a remarkable achievement. Congratulations. I heard you play in a concert recently at the high school, but I feel like you played something other than bass clarinet. A musician, more than one instrument?
Multiple clarinets, soprano, bass, and Sleigh Ride's very last piece, piccolo clarinet piece. This tiny one that you don't really want to hear.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to invite you up, and we have a small certificate here. And I don't know if I have my photographer, Mr. Bennett. Are you able to take a picture for us? If I hand you my phone.
That's great. Should we play for us?
Yes, I'm on my way.
I know, we know it. We should have invited you to play. Certificate from the school committee recognizing you for your participation. Congratulations. You're a wonderful representative from Westwood. Mr. Bevan's going to take it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's like,
There you go. Anything else here?
Yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce your teacher? Noah's parents are here as well. Congratulations.
Also
to
here
them.
with my parents. Thank you for putting up with my practicing. And my teacher, Melissa Lorenzo, and I just want to thank you for everything you've done.
And it's such a pleasure. She's a Westwood teacher through the college program.
Fantastic. Thank you for your work as well.
Great student. It's been truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Congratulations. tell people that you're not obligated to stay for the remainder of the meeting. If you'd like to get home. Okay. So second item on the superintendent's report is the quarter two financial report, which is included in your packet. I don't know, Heath, if there's anything you want to say about that?
No, it seems like we're right on track, as I noted on our cover page, but if you have any questions, then you have to answer them.
Any questions on the financial report? Okay, great. I want to give a quick update on the middle school principal search. So, as you know, we posted the position in December, right before the school vacation, and things are progressing. So we have had actually a couple of sitting middle school principals reach out to us to have some conversations about the position, get some more information, so that's very promising. We have also hired someone to do some work sort of reaching out to potential candidates for us. So just a few hours, but I think it was worth making some phone calls and sort of working a network of people that we have. I did put something out just this week to faculty and staff at the middle school to get volunteers to serve on the interview committee. And either tomorrow or the beginning of next week, depending on how my day goes, I will be getting something out to middle school parents also looking for volunteers to be on that committee, and probably also to a 5th grade parent, somebody who has an incoming 6th grader as well. So we're off and running. The posting closes on the 22nd of January. The interviews will be taking place in February, the weeks leading up to the school break, with the goal being to appoint a new principal by March 1st.
Okay, and then after that, we move on to.
So once we have a principal in place, then fairly soon after that, we will be doing a search for the assistant principal position as well. So things are in progress on that front. And then lastly, the building project community engagement. I just thought that every month we should be talking about what we're doing in that process. So as you know, we have a published community engagement plan with a timeline. There were some action steps for January that are in progress. So at this point, the school committee members have toured our elementary buildings so that you can see firsthand what some of the needs are. We have created our building project webpage that will be associated with the district website. It isn't live yet. We're going to be doing a big launch in about a week. I was recently interviewed by the Westwood Media Center, so the new Westwood News program that comes out once a month will feature me talking about the building project soon.
When's that coming out?
I think it's coming out in a couple days. I'm concerned to over-promote it. I have not seen it yet, but hopefully it went well. And we are also working with our communications consultant. So we have a draft that we're working on for the sort of initial communication that's going to be mailed out. And we believe that that should be mailed out sometime by midweek next week. It's kind of introducing the need and talking with residents about what the plan is to engage them. So within the next week to 10 days, that first communication will be out. We'll be sending some letters to the local press, trying to sort of reach residents in that way as well, putting some things out on social media. And then looking ahead to February, we are in the process of planning an open house at the 3 elementary buildings that we're interested in getting people into. So that should be in February, more information on that to come. And also looking ahead to schedule some forums, hopefully at the Council on Aging.
So the open houses will be tours?
Yeah, so still in progress, but we think what it's going to be is maybe a 2-hour window where Hanlon, Sheehan, and Deerfield would all be open to the public. And we would have some tour guides, maybe a tour starts, say, sort of every 15 minutes, and just kind of take people through a what to look for guide, kind of handouts so people know what some of the key issues are. You know, it occurs to us that some residents maybe they've been to Deerfield, but just for, you know, basketball on Saturday, so they've been as far as the door in the gym. Right. We want to get people in to see some of the teaching learning spaces.
No, thank you for the time you spent taking us to show us those. Excellent. And now that the Media Center is doing creative work for us, I wonder if it would be possible for you maybe one time to take the Media Center to just a bunch of the schools that like the hallways that are now storage sites. That is, that we don't have any storage space. I mean, just to go see some of the things that we need to change and have that available to the town through the media center would be, for people who can't come and do the tours you're talking about, which I think are great, but I think that would be good investment, I think, to let the town know how poorly some of these schools are and need something to happen.
I think that's a great idea. Maybe I could get them to come on the open house day. We can get some reactions or something. Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
In the talking points you sent on, you want comments offline? Just email?
Oh, I mean, I welcome, that would be great.
I'll just email.
Yeah, okay, great. That was the other thing. So we have developed some common talking points so that we're all sort of on the same page.
Elevator speech.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
the biggest thing is, beyond talking points, is just explaining, it's taking a step back and explaining what the MSBA is, because as I started to talk to people, it's like, 20 people in this room know what it is, but the other, none of the residents really know what it is. So just
Yep.
explaining it and taking a step back, that's probably my biggest thing.
Yep.
And broadly what the process is, not the, 23-step process, but
Right.
broadly what they do and how the process works.
Yes.
Yeah, but just
Right.
broadly, yeah.
I'd just like to pass around some of the research that I've been doing without driving anybody too nuts. But the issue that I've been concerned with is how do we rank compared to the towns we compete with? We're not MCAS and the rest. So, but this is a summary of something I'll hand out to you later, but I think if we looked at how new are our schools versus other towns, I think if we did this analysis for how new is our fire department, our police department, and library, would be at the top of the list, with new in the last 15 years. So this thing I handed out is, how do the towns we compete with, how new are their schools? So if we look at the list here, and the second column is new schools in the last 15 years. And Winchester has built in the last 15 years 3 new schools out of 6. Weston 2 new schools out of 3. Lexington 4 new schools out of 6. Concord Carlisle 3 new schools out of 3. Duxbury 2 new schools out of 2. That's I think why John might be going there. But and then so I'm also going to hand out. You don't really need to take this unless you can't get to sleep tonight. The analysis that I kind of did, which you saw a little bit last time, which lists by each year. A B is a built school, additions, renovations that I gathered this data from. But it's something that what you look at when you look at this thing is that everybody in the towns we compete with built in the 50s. So all the schools we're dealing with in the 50s. And Emily has found this out too as she's met with the state officials who are very aware of this. But then we look at the 90s and the 2000s, the additions, the renovations, and all of that. There's a big cluster there. And that's kind of when we stepped in, where we did some renovations. We fixed up the Martha Jones at Downing. But that's where the Bs are, where the people built. So what my final conclusion looking at this is that we're way behind our competitive school systems in new schools in the elementary level recently. And that's basically why we're now looking at what we're looking at. But if people are out there questioning you, why do we need to spend our money on that? Well, if Concord Carlisle can build 3 new schools in this period of time, and we're competing with them, our success is because of tremendous teachers and administrators out there making use of the space that we have. So this is any value to you, it's there for you to take advantage of. And as I said, I have some time in my hands, so that's why I answered my question. And he thanked me for gathering the data to do this.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. All right. Before we move on to public participation, you should all know that we have an alum in the room here, and so be on your best behavior. Mr. Doherty came back from minutes to make sure that we're still doing our jobs, and that's why you're here, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So welcome back. Good to see you. Okay. All right, and with that, if you want to participate in public participation, you can. So we take the next few minutes. Anyone who has a question or issue with regard to the schools and would like to participate, I ask you to raise your hand, give your name and address and social security. And what?
Cindy Buckley, 41 Millbrook Road. I have noticed that the school zone, I guess it's called, speeding sign, the 20 miles an hour sign that blinks. is on in front of the Sheehan School at like 7:10 in the morning. And then it's not on at 8:30 when the kids are actually there. So I don't know if they're computerized or somehow programmed in a central location, but because they seem to be almost programmed for the high school more than the elementary school. And same thing in the afternoon. It's on at 2:10 in the afternoon, but it's not on at 3:10. So, and I probably should have called the
DPW,
This
yeah.
isn't necessarily the right forum for that, but I thought maybe you guys could,
Okay,
look
yeah.
into that.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's important. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Anything on your mind? No? Yes.
My name is Megan Brink at 47 Briar Lane. I just want to, as co-chair of CPAC, thank all of you for your continued support of the organization and the special education programs in Westwood. We have a personal cheerleader on the school committee. I know Charlie is such a great support for us. I did want to let you know about a program we have next month. I think we've gotten very lucky that we've got somewhat of a celebrity this evening in the therapist world that's coming to speak to the parents. I didn't really know who the man was until I put it out there, and people were like, oh, he's great, he's fantastic, he speaks all over the place, locally. Next month at the high school is Mental Health Awareness Week for the students. And so Joanna Bengal had suggested that maybe I do something for the parents. So we reached out to an organization that organizes speakers all over the country for free, which is great. And there's a local gentleman coming to speak about mental health, dealing with mental health crises with your children, so to the parents. So I'll be on February 6th. It's all over the district bulletin, and you should be seeing it pop up in your emails and things. And he's going to be talking about topics such as suicide, self-harm, and the emotional consequences of social media and technology. So some pertinent topics, and apparently he's humorous, engaging.
Who is it?
His name's John Medelman. I don't know. Allison, you said because he was great. But
He's out of Needham.
he's out of Needham? Okay. A guidance counselor in Needham said the same thing to me, that she had heard him speak. So he'll be here in the Little Theater. It is open. It is a CPAC, Special Education Parent Advisory Council event, but it clearly affects the whole community. So all are welcome, of course. So spread the word.
Thanks for the work you're doing, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. It's great. Anyone else? No? Okay. With that, we're going to move on then to our discussion items. This is that time of year, folks. Right? Budget, so presentation of the budget, and going over your recommendations and so forth. We're ready.
Great. So if it's okay with the committee, I thought I would present from here. Is that okay? Okay, so I'll present from here, and in the interest of efficiency, I'm going to present the operating budget and then turn it over to Heath for some remarks about the capital budget, but the whole team is here to answer questions. That's helpful. All right, so I'm pleased to present the proposed FY19 operating budget tonight. Just first a few words about the process of developing the budget. I think we had a good process this year. So the budget is developed first by cost center leaders, so department chairs, directors, principals, working together in their schools to identify needs and priorities. And then all of those requests come into the district level, and as a district leadership team, pre-K to 12, we look at everything and we see if we can figure out sort of where all of those different priorities fall. Some things that happened this year as well is that I, along with some central office folks, did a bit of a listening tour of the district. So we went around each of the schools, we met with faculty and staff. We really learned some things that influenced how we were thinking about the budget. As you know, we have been having some discussions throughout the course of the fall at school committee about what the committee's priorities are. We did a lot of work in the fall around the research around class size and reviewing the class size guidelines, which influence the budget development. We've been working collaboratively with folks from the town. So Carol, Heath, and I are part of a budget steering committee that has worked throughout the fall to make sure that we're communicating in a timely way about the school department's needs. So through this process, originally the requests that came in from the cost center leaders topped 6%. I don't think anything there was particularly crazy or ridiculous to put on the table. But we did have to go through a process as a team where we thought about our goals and other factors and identified priorities, and we made some choices to arrive at tonight's proposed budget. So I would just say that I think the proposed budget really amply provides for the district's needs. We feel good about this budget, but it does leave some wishes unfunded that I'll talk about. So here's the big picture that the FY19 budget is a 3.38% increase over FY18, so that's about $1.5 million. Of that increase, about 1.1 million of it is for contractual salary increases in the neighborhood of about 2.6% for what we call level services, meaning that we would have the same sort of people and stuff when we open the doors in September that we have now. And I thought I'd put this into some historic context. So this graph represents the school department's budget increases over, well, even more than, a little more than a decade. And what's interesting is when you look down at the left side of the graph, you kind of see this, spiking phenomenon. And that graph represents the way that I kind of remember school budgets functioning when I first became a teacher. And what you can't actually see is that in FY06, the community actually went out for an operational override and it failed. And so in FY07, even though we got that 4.42% increase, it actually wasn't enough to fund level services. And so that year we were laying people off. That was my first year as high school principal. In my first couple of months, I was told you need to cut $250,000 out of the high school budget. So we were ripping people at that time. And then that led to FY08, where we had an override. So we got this huge increase of 13% where we got back the positions that we had cut, and then we also were able to grow the budget.
Is that the year that we cut all the AP classes?
That was FY07, where we cut a bunch of APs,
Yeah.
So we sort of recovered in FY08, but I think we all knew that's not really a good way to sort of grow strategically, right? When you're laying people off and trying to do that. And it was sort of fortuitous that we got the override when we did, because as we all now know, the economy collapsed right after that. And so we kind of lived off of that override for several years with 0% in FY10, right? And these very, very small, increases. And I would point out that we have not had an override in Westwood since then, since FY08, which is pretty remarkable, because before that we used to have an override every years. It was kind of incredible. Right. It was kind of expected that was going to be necessary for a few years. So it is incredible, and we kind of started steadily, getting our way back from this downturn in the economy, and then you can see here in FY16, FY17, the school department has really benefited from the new growth at University Station. So we were able to have some really healthy budgets in there. And we continue to reap the benefit of that, right? Because now that we're getting in the 3% increase zone, we're taking 3% of a much bigger number, right? We've sort of improved the base of the budget. So the last couple of years here, we've been back in sort of this steady Eddie place where we can get level services, and now we can get a little more. We can start thinking about what else we can do. And right now, thankfully, that feels like a pretty good place to be. And I would say that when we developed this budget, we talked as a team about the fact that we wanted to come in with a responsible and sustainable number that lets us get some real things done. Because we're mindful of the fact that we do have some needs on the horizon with our elementary building projects, and we're going to need to get people to invest in that. So this is where we are. So the big picture highlights, as I said, it's a 3.38% increase, no cuts to programs or services. The contractual salary increase is about 1.1 million. But then we're able to do actually quite a lot here. So we're proposing the addition of 8.75 FTEs, that's full-time equivalent, across the district. which includes 5.6 FTEs in special education, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. Also, thinking about the conversations we've had here with the committee, I know a priority has been to see if we could work towards eliminating the kindergarten tuition fee. So we talked about we're one of only, I think, 67 of like 300 in some districts in Massachusetts with full-day kindergarten who are charging tuition to attend. It's part of our core program. So we think that this is an important goal. So this budget is year one of a 2-year plan to eliminate that tuition. So here's the budget broken down by the major budget categories. And as you can see, by far the largest portion of our school budget is salaries, which shouldn't be a surprise. That's true in any district. Schools are people organizations. Our human capital is what makes us run. So we have about 86.5% of the total budget accounted for in that salary category. And then on this chart, we can see some other things that are happening here. So in our special education non-salary, so that's things like tuitions and transportation and all kinds of other things, we're actually seeing a decrease this year, which partially offsets some of the special education staff that we would like to add. We also this year went through a process as a team of really looking back carefully at our actual expenditures over the last 3 years, and we made some adjustments to line items based on that understanding. So we've downwardly adjusted our utilities budget pretty substantially, and that reflects what we are now actually spending. Part of that is because we're realizing some savings from some measures like installing energy efficient boilers and things like that. So we feel comfortable taking that reduction in utilities.
Can we just go all gas? I remember when we put it in, it could be gas, could be oil, it's just.
Yeah, we have dual fuel both here and at the middle. All the elementary is gas.
Can you speak up a little bit? It's hard to hear you in the back of the room.
Here at the high school and the middle school, we have dual fuel, but all the elementaries have gas at this point. We transitioned like the Hanlon and the Deerfield, who used to be oil, onto gas.
And then the dual fuel schools here in the middle school, do we use gas primarily?
We do, but we do run the oil system at least once a year to keep it active.
So we've taken some reductions in utilities, and we have reallocated in some cases. So we've taken some reductions, but we've also then increased some other line items that we noticed we historically overspent. So we're trying to make the budget really align with our best estimate of where we'll be spending. So if you add up the 4 non-salary lines there, the net is actually a decrease of about $18,000. And I should make clear that the non-salary items that we've cut, there's no items in there that directly impact kids, right? So we're not cutting curriculum materials or instructional supplies. So the context for this budget has to do with shifting district enrollment. So here is what's happened with our district enrollment over the last 10 years, and that doesn't look terribly dramatic, right? The enrollment of the district hasn't fluctuated much. It's gone up a little, it's gone down a little. It's been, sort of within like a 5% delta. But it has been trending down a little bit, and you can see that next year is actually going to be the 10-year low in terms of district enrollment. The real story that was sort of hidden in that graph, if we look at it this way, though, we can see that something interesting is happening in terms of where our population is in the district. So if you look at the blue line, that's the elementary schools, and you can see that our elementary population has been declining for 10 years. And in fact, it has decreased by 15% over a 10-year period. We have 220 fewer kids next year than we did 10 years ago. And just to provide a frame of reference, 220 kids is more kids than are currently enrolled at the Deerfield School. It is the size of the Hanlon School. So that's not an insignificant number. But at the same time, our secondary enrollment has been going up, and that's because effectively we've had an enrollment bubble that has been kind of moving through the district over this period of time. So if you look at the green line, that's the middle school. The population at the middle school increased, and it peaked in 2014, 2015, and then it's kind of plateaued, and it's hovered around 800 kids for the last few years. The biggest class in the district is currently grade 6, but next year it's starting to decline, and that should continue for the next several years. If you look at the elementary line, you can see what's happening. The high school enrollment, which is that yellowish-orange line in the middle, is increasing, and it's still increasing, and it will peak in 2021, 2020, 2021 school year.
The school is built for what, 1,000 kids?
1,000, and we're going to peak out sort of just over that.
So I don't think it's any other, I mean, there is, I don't want to go down right now, there is another graph that'd be interesting, is to look at the elementary school, school by school, the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Because compared to 5 years ago, Downey's actually bigger.
I'm going to show you
Okay,
that in a
good.
bit.
I
Not on a
wanna
graph,
see
but
that.
on a chart. I've
All
only
right.
got 3 years, but
All right.
I understand where
That's
you're going.
interesting.
Yeah. So this actually kind of speaks to that. So in the FY19 budget, we are doing a lot of things with the positions that are really about reallocating staff, and we're reallocating in a couple of ways. So, for example, next year we will be reducing 2 classroom teachers at Deerfield, and that's because right now we have 3 grade 5s at Deerfield, but the incoming kindergarten at Deerfield next year is projected at 19 kids. So we'll only need 1 section of kindergarten. So we have 11 classrooms at Deerfield this year, but next year we'll have 9. But the population is going up at the high school, and we need staff at the high school, so we can take those 2 positions from a budget perspective and reallocate them to a different level and put them at the high school. And then this is sort of getting to your point, Tony. The elementary enrollment is declining, but it's not declining proportionally at each of the 5 schools, right? That isn't happening. And so next year, we are proposing reducing a teacher at Martha Jones. It's a similar phenomenon. We have 3 grade 5s, but we only have 2 incoming Ks. And, contrast that with Downey, where we currently have 2 kindergarten classrooms. Next year, we are projecting 54 kindergartners at Downey, which really needs to be 3 sections in kindergarten. And so we can reallocate a position from Martha Jones to Downey. And then there are other things that happen. So at Hanlon right now, the 5th grade is a singleton class of 26. They've been sort of 26 all through. And they have a class size aide to provide some additional support to the class. We won't need that next year because we won't have that large class. But when we add another section of kindergarten at Downey, we're going to need to add a kindergarten assistant. So I put this up here to show that that's a lot of movement, but the net impact is 0 to the budget. So there are several positions, however, that we would like to add. I'm going to start with the high school. So as we just talked about, the high school enrollment is going up. So you can see we'll be at 1,016 next year, and it's going to continue to climb. And because the enrollment has been going up, then our class sizes at the high school have been increasing as well. It's not as sort of neat a math problem as it is at the elementary level, where you're just dividing it into a couple of classes. It's a little more complicated with the high school master schedule. But this year, 20% of classes at the high school have 25 or more students, and generally that's a number, we're trying to keep our classes below 25 if we can. What you can see in this chart is that certain departments have been impacted more than others. So the science department has 33% of its classes with 25 or more students. That's partly because the enrollment's going up overall, and also because, as you know, we're really focusing on science right now as a district. We've added several science electives: computer science, engineering, marine biology, environmental science and ecology. We have a lot of kids at the high school with more than 1 science class in here. So we would like to decrease classes there in particular. So we're proposing that we add a full-time high school science teacher next year to lower class sizes and support that elective program. And then we are proposing a 1.0 FTE yet to be allocated teacher at the high school. And so we know that we have some large class sizes in other areas. What we would like to do, though, is go through the course selection process in February, and then we'll have a much better sense of where we can have the most impact with this position. And it will add that this position can be split up, right? So it might not be a full-time something. We might say, well, we need 0.4 in social studies, we need 0.6 in English, or whatever it is. So it provides us some flexibility to be thoughtful and strategic about where we put that position. If I had to guess, it probably will end up in social studies and English, because those are two departments that have an elective-based program for seniors. So the middle school, they have seen the peak of their enrollment, and they're actually going to have declining enrollment next year. And what's happened is over the last several years, as the population has grown at the middle school, we've added a lot of positions at Thurston. So we have added positions in core academics, we've added positions in the arts, and we did that in part because of the increased enrollment, and also because we've added programs at Thurston as well. So we added computer science, we added engineering, we expanded music offerings, we added an adjustment counselor. So we've done a lot of work with the middle school. And as a result, Thurston is well staffed right now to meet the needs of students there. We don't need to add any staff. We are making investments in Thurston in other ways in this budget. So we are proposing in the non-salary category some money to continue our work with curriculum materials for science technology. So then the elementary. So this is, I think, what you're asking about, Tony. So this is just a 3-year look here. But you can see that the shifts in population aren't happening the same way at every school. So Deerfield, the population is going down at Deerfield. Next year, though, the enrollment's going up at Downey. Hanlon is staying the same. Martha Jones down, Sheehan down. And I think one of the things that this sort of highlights is that given the size of our schools, small shifts can have a big impact. So we don't have much flexibility when you have 5 very small schools to sort of smooth out the impact over multiple sections. You end up with situations like we have at Deerfield, where right now, next year we'll have a singleton kindergarten, a singleton first grade, right? There aren't that many options. And when you end up, as we know, with a number that's sort of not desirable, when you split it in 2, it's hard to then split it into 3, right? So we have some issues with scale here. And I do think that that is an important issue, an important conversation to have as part of the building project conversation. But in FY19, it means that we need to shift staff between buildings. So here is what we project for next year and what we think the classroom configuration will look like at the elementary level. It's a lot to take in, but I will point out a few things here. So we took an extra step in the budget process this year around kindergarten. So when we talk about what we're projecting for kindergarten, here's what we mean. So we have information from the town that's based on census data about how old kids are in town and how many kids will be eligible for kindergarten in each of our districts. And what we did this year was we sent a letter to all of those people and said, could you please let us know by this date if you know you are definitely sending your kid to kindergarten, you're definitely not sending your kid to kindergarten, or you don't know yet. And we got back a lot of information, didn't hear from everybody, but what we did was we took all of the yeses, and anybody who didn't respond, we considered a yes.
Okay.
Right? So that's our premise. But it was helpful to know, because in some cases, 6 families said, actually, no, we're not sending them to the public school, or we're going to hold the kid out a year, whatever it is. So we think this is pretty good information, or at least as good as it can be right now. Right? So you can see at Deerfield next year, we're projecting 1K, 1 grade 1, 2 sections at every other grade. You can see class sizes at Deerfield are very small, right? 14 and 15. At the Downey School, as I mentioned, we're projecting 54 incoming kindergartners, so we think we need 3 sections. We currently have 2 sections at Downey, and I want to acknowledge that those sections are bigger than we thought they would be when we set the budget for this year. Right? We have 24 and 123 kids moving on to grade 1. That certainly was a major consideration when we developed the budget. And you'll see that what we're proposing is that we have full-time literacy paraprofessionals in each of those grade 1 classes. The bottom line is that we don't have another classroom space at Downey. So we've put those paraprofessionals in place. We think they'll provide a good deal of support. If something were to change dramatically in those numbers, we would have to put on our thinking caps and try to figure something out. With the money for the 2, literacy paraprofessionals in the budget, it's not really about money, right? 2 literacy paraprofessionals is about the same as a teacher. So there are some other logistical considerations. I do think it's worth pointing out that in both the kindergartens and the grade 1s at Downey, that there are students included in those classrooms who we consider to be part of the class and are included in that number, who are part of our specialized programs and in fact aren't in the general ed classroom for core academic instruction. And so that there's a little more to that number may be immediately apparent.
How many kids?
Varies by grade level.
In that grade 1?
I couldn't probably tell you that without reaching in with confidentiality. It's a small number.
Yeah.
And the other number, I think it was 18 that are currently from University Station, because people always ask. I think it was 18 down.
K to 5.
K to 5,
So there
yeah,
are
down,
currently
yeah.
18 kids who live at University Station at Downey, and I'm sure you're not implying otherwise, but I'm just going to say it loud, and those kids are our kids, right? They live in Westwood, like they live on Hartford Street. But there's clearly been some impact in terms of the number of kids enrolled at Downey. So that's also an interesting thing to think about. I don't actually recall the discussion about how University Station got district, how it got assigned to Downey. I don't know.
I think it was just because
Just because sort of proximity.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And so then at Hanlon is an interesting situation because, as you will recall, this past August, we decided to add another section of kindergarten at Hanlon. So we actually have 3 Ks at Hanlon right now that I think are 16, 16, and 15. And we knew at that time that we weren't necessarily going to be able to sustain 3 sections going forward. We were able to do that this year because Hanlon has a singleton grade 5 this year, and so we had an extra classroom, and so we were able to do it, and so we did it. But next year, we are going to need 2 grade 5s, and we don't have that room. And the number of incoming kindergartners at Hanlon is 29. So after a lot of thought and discussion, we have decided to implement a kindergarten, a K1, and 2 1s next year, which allows us to have very good class sizes for all 4 of those sections. And it's a model that we like. It's been a good model at some other elementary schools in the district. So that's our plan there. Martha Jones, I'll just point out that there's a number there that leaps out at you. So grade 4 for next year, we 2 sections, 24 and 25. So 24 is just that guideline for grade 4. 25 is 1 over. Those kids, we already have a class size aide in place at Martha Jones, and this budget retains that class size aide. So that remains, and there may be some other flexibility with IAs at Martha Jones, and Mrs. Tobin is aware of that, and I trust her judgment about where to deploy it. Again, if something were to really change over time, then we could look at that situation and respond if necessary. And then Sheehan's just plugging along, so Sheehan's back up to 3 Ks again next year. So this is what we think will be happening. So in order to make that happen, there are a lot of staffing changes in the form of both additions and reductions. So I've already mentioned we would decrease 2 classrooms at Deerfield, decrease 1 classroom at Martha Jones, and decrease a paraprofessional at Hanlon. We won't need that class size aide in grade 5 anymore. We would add a classroom teacher at Downey. We'd have another K. We would add a kindergarten assistant at Downey, add 2 literacy paraprofessionals at Downey to support grade 1. And then we are proposing adding a tiny fraction of math specialist time at Hanlon. Mrs. Cronin has been asking for this for years. She wore us So this gets the math specialist position to full-time at Hanlon, brings them into line.
That wasn't done soon?
Well, you know, we are kind of conservative and persnickety when we look at our allocations. We've been doing things proportional to population. But, you know, sometimes, and this happens a lot with specialist staffing, it's often not about the FTE and the number of kids, it's about scheduling and having flexibility to do what you need to do. And so you need this person here 5 days a week. And then we have 2 elementary staffing requests that are not related to class size, but are related to district goals and priorities. So we are proposing adding a full-time ABA tutor district-wide. ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. It's a particular methodology. And this really, in large part, came out of that listening tour. So we're really responding to an articulated need from teachers to have some social emotional learning supports in place in general education classrooms. And we think that it's actually an interesting and important discussion, and we've been talking about it a lot and thinking, what do we want to do long-term strategically around some of the issues that are arising. And this, I don't think, is the long-term answer, but we want to put something into place right now to support what we're hearing as a need. So this person would be based at Sheehan, but working in all 5 elementary schools under the supervision of the district BCBAs, and would be used to provide some coaching and support to teachers putting student behavior plans in place. And then we'd like to add a part-time, 10 hours per week science materials manager. And we've talked about this before. There's just a whole lot of stuff involved with elementary science, and we need somebody to build the kits and drive them around to different buildings and do all that kind of work.
So will the tutor be working mostly with teachers and staff, or will they be working more with students, or both?
We would envision the person providing coaching and support and modeling how to implement a behavior plan for the general ed teachers, answering their questions, fading out after a couple weeks, going to the next place, and really being a resource.
Good.
And then you have some other ABA tutors also in the budget. How do they differ?
So an ABA tutor has a skill set around behavior, and there's different kinds of behavior because of different kinds of reasons. And so there's a subset of behavior related to the disability of autism, which is what we're going to talk about next, whereas sometimes there's other kinds of behavior. Right?
And then finally, in terms of staffing, so we're proposing a reduction of 0.4 FTE at central office, and this reflects a change in responsibilities of the district professional development coordinator.
Can I ask a question about the high school?
Yeah.
You're proposing a high school science position, a full-time position. How will that decrease the numbers in classes?
So that, it's hard to say. I mean, so if you get a science position, the number of sections that you get out of that differs depending on if they're lab courses or not. So if they were all lab courses, that would be 4 classes. And so, I mean, it's hard for me to say, like, you know, what percentage of classes will now not be over 25? Yeah. It's hard to really say until we start building the master schedule, and we would take a look and say, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? But so if you imagine for a second, you know, if you've got 7 honors biology classes and you decide to put in 1 more honors biology class, right? It probably ends up taking, you know, 3 kids out of each class and moving them into another section if it's evenly. So you might move from like 24 to 21 in each of those sections. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're taking that, you have 1 science teacher allocated, and then you have another teacher that you're not sure where you're put them, but you have 25% of the math classes also in the guidelines.
Could go there.
But I think what you said was you probably put it in English.
Well, what I said is that's my prediction. That's how it's going to come out in the master schedule, and that's just because in social studies and in English we have an elective-based program, and so things kind of skew. Sometimes you get big classes at the high school because everything doesn't break evenly in the master schedule, right? And so sometimes that's what you need. You need to add another section to try to smooth out some of that skew.
I guess my question, 2 teachers at the high school, allocating 2 teachers, is that going to be enough to do?
Yeah, well, so that's a good question. I mean, I think it is going to have an impact. You'll see on the what went unfunded. I mean, sure, we could use another teacher at the high school, but you know, the high school department chairs put in their requests. We really thought about them. They looked at them as a team, and I think they're excited that they're even getting the second full-time position. I appreciate the thinking, though. Okay, so special education. So there is some positive news here in special education. Special education, as you know, is the most volatile part of any school district budget. There's this interesting sort of interdependent relationship between providing legally mandated services for kids, the fact that kids' needs change, and the school budget. And so it's hard to forecast. But we do a lot of careful thinking about the students that we know we have in the district right now. The 2 largest drivers, tuition and transportation, are projected to decrease next year. And you know, this reflects a relatively stable and low number of students in out-of-district placements. We have between 22 and 24 students, we think, next year. That's about 4% of our special ed population. We do know that we have some students who will turn 22 and will age out of the district. And it also, I think, reflects the commitment that we have as a district to educating our kids in district when possible, right? So that's one
What's
of our
collaborative
values.
tuition mean?
So in special education, there are tiers of kind of restrictiveness of schools, and collaboratives are a structure where the towns go in together, pool their money, and build a classroom. We host one here at the high school, the Tech Collaborative. So it's a category of expense, and they're a special, different kind of school than a private school.
Okay.
Less expensive.
Thank you.
And that's a nice testament to the transportation contract with a 0% increase year over year. So that was a well-negotiated contract.
Is that a 3-year contract, a 2-year contract? How does that work? A year to year?
That was a 3-year
It was a
contract.
multi-year, yeah, this is the best year of it.
And that's, you may recall that, when was it, 2 years ago, we switched companies.
Yes.
And we've been very happy both with the service and also with the
So,
The stability is nice.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of special education staffing, so a lot of our special education staffing needs are related to something that's called the Westwood Applied Behavioral Analysis Program, so we call it WABA. And we need to expand WABA, basically. We need to break it into 2 different parts. And this is because we need to accommodate an increased number of students who need this particular program. So in Westwood, as the case in across the country, we've seen an increase in the number of students on the autism spectrum, and WABA is a program that serves those students. So right now we have 1 WABA classroom. It's housed at the Downey School, even though it's a district-wide program. It serves kids right now in grades K to 4. And we know that the number of kids enrolled in the program, or we project the number is going to increase next year. We need to split it into lower WABA, which could accommodate pre-K to 2, probably 4-year-olds to grade 2, and then upper WABA, grades 3 to 5. Right now, the size of the program is such, it's all housed in 1 classroom. We just need more space, and we need more staff, and we also have to meet some DESE regulations around age and grade span within 1 classroom. And you know, the good news is that it really allows us to educate students in their community rather than out of district placements, and that's important to us if we can do that in an educationally sound way. And it happens to be a financially responsible model as well, so it's good news on both fronts. So the following positions are needed to create lower and upper WABA. We need a full-time intensive special education BCBA teacher. BCBA stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. We'd also add 3 ABA tutors, a 0.4 augmentative communication, speech and language therapist, and a 0.2 occupational therapist. And that would then create a team to create this lower WABA program. And as I mentioned before, the cost of these positions is partially offset by that $88,000 reduction in out-of-district tuition and special education transportation costs. And then we have 2 other special education staffing requests that are not related to WAPA. So we'd like to increase 0.4 FTE instructional assistants. This is just sort of elementary district-wide to allow for service delivery of kids' IEPs. And then a 0.6 FTE speech and language therapist at the high school. It's related to the fact that enrollment's gone up at the high school. It's to meet service delivery for kids we know are moving from grade 8 to 9, and also because we have students at the high school whose IEPs afford them access to public education through age 22, and their need is in speech and language services. So that's it for staff. And then we have some non-salary things to talk about. So we mentioned the kindergarten tuition reduction. The committee had initially asked if we could eliminate it all in year 1, and last month I foreshadowed I thought we would need to phase it out over 3 years, but good news. We came up with a plan to phase it out over 2 years. So the tuition is currently $1,800 a year. Next year it would be $900, and then the year after that it would be free. So in order to do that, though, there is an impact to the budget of $85,000, which is a 0.2% increase to the operating budget to allow us to do this. And then in our non-salary accounts, we have a net change of it's an $18,000 decrease, and that reflects additions and reductions and reallocations, and when you put it all together, it comes out to negative $18,000. So the additions to the budget, as I mentioned, we're investing in the middle school and online science, technology, and engineering curriculum resources. We want to fold into the operating budget the annual writers conference at Thurston, which we started using a wonderful grant from the Foundation for Westwood Education. Do I have the new name right? Yes. And it was a wonderful program, great success. We would like to keep doing that and want to fund it within the budget. We need to restore some professional development funding. So there is a grant that the state has, and they, earlier in the fall, sort of very suddenly and without warning, slashed the grant, and we're feeling the impact of that, so we would like to fund that through our own budget. We need to increase special education contracted services. We need a certified nursing assistant at the high school to deal with some kids who have some significant disabilities and have some serious medical needs. We are planning to try this with contracted services next year and see how that goes and determine going forward if we want to bring that resource in district. And then finally, we have to take a reduction in the circuit breaker offset. And you know that circuit breaker is this mechanism in Massachusetts where the state provides some reimbursement to local communities to offset the, the cost of very expensive special education students. And so this is like the good news, bad news is that we have fewer kids who are in very costly out-of-district placements, so we also don't have as many things to submit for reimbursement. And in addition, the percentage of reimbursement at the state has been decreased from 75% to 65%. So we've got to reduce our offset. And finally, we are offsetting some of these additions by making reductions in several line items. So we looked very hard at our non-salary accounts this year, looked at actual spending. So for example, advertising, we were able to take about $15,000 out of our advertising budget because we realized we really don't put big ads in the Globe anymore, and they were really expensive. So we took that out. We taken a look at our photocopier maintenance contracts. We aren't spending as much on textbooks in some areas because we're purchasing online resources. So we really took a look at those things and made some changes. We've already talked about the cost savings in electricity.
So can I ask a question? So maybe we'll talk about it later. So I know we'll probably have a warrant in May around some of the design. Mm-hmm. Are there other things like communications? Is there other things we might need in the next year as part of the engagement with the community, or other things that won't be part of the warrant? I guess?
Right. So in this year's budget, remember the committee added some money for a consultant, communication consultant, which we're starting to use, and we've left it in there for next year. So I think that we're covered on that front. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know if there was other operating expenses that we might,
none that I can
Okay.
think of, but if I'm missing something,
All right.
give me a heads up on that. But I think we're okay. And then we've made adjustments to line items such as transportation and maintenance, which have historically been overspent. So to put this all in context, we like to look at how our spending in Westwood compares to other districts. So this is the FY16 per pupil expenditures in many area districts. This is the most current data that's been released by DESE. It's a little hard to read, but the circle to the right is Westwood. So there's our per pupil cost, somewhere about $16,500, right? And then the circle on the left is the state per pupil, the average, and that's about $15,500. So I'm sure it comes as no surprise that we spend a little more on Westwood than is the state average. But I think you can see that we're in no way on the really high end of this graph. So you can see that dot that's practically not even on the chart. That's Concord Carlisle. They're up at about 21 something. And then, you know, Lincoln, Sudbury, Dover, Sherburne, we spend a lot more than we do in Westwood. And so I think it's helpful to look at that. You know, this is a community that certainly invests in education, clearly, but I also think gets a good value for its investment as compared to other districts. And Medfield is not on here, I realized, so I need to look that up, because I know people are going to want to know about Medfield. So I'll have to
Duxbury's on
get
that side of the graph too.
I thought about putting Duxbury in there, and then I thought people would interpret that as editorializing in some way, so I did not. So what's missing? Some of the things that we talked about, some of the unfunded requests, and I put, you know, there were other things too, but I put these up here as a sample because I wanted to kind of show the range. So when we first start thinking about what our requests are, I want you to know that we do think expansively, and we think about things that are pie in the sky, and that would be really just kind of awesome if we could have them. And so Allison's laughing because I keep using her example, because I kind of love it, which is a mobile science lab to serve all 5 elementary schools, and she could talk all about that. But it's just sort of a neat, innovative idea that we've decided is maybe not fully incubated or totally ready for prime time. But we did start talking about that. And then we quickly decided that that wasn't going to make it into the FY19 budget. But we do think, like, what would we do if we were just going to do something that was exciting and...
What happened to elementary broadly?
Yeah, well, we did the math. And it was really very expensive. And then there are other things, you know, maybe we do, you know, could use some additional staffing at the high school. We looked at fully eliminating the kindergarten tuition. We talked about another custodian for the high school. This building is used practically 24/7. You know, a part-time elementary orchestra teacher. We'd love to bring that into the program. But ultimately, we made some choices and identified priorities, and these things are kind of left on the cutting room floor. But probably we'll be back.
You don't have to answer this question.
Yeah.
Again, question I answered. But was there anything, I mean, it doesn't have to be one of these things. Was there anything like that's kind of near, like on your wish list, collectively wish list that's kind of close to the margin?
So I will let people answer. You don't have to agree with me. One of the things that's interesting in this process is when we looked at them all and we did an interesting protocol and we divided into groups and all this, and what we found was there was tremendous consensus around what the top priorities were. Like, everybody gelled around that. And we kind of talked about tiers and buckets. Tier 1, everybody agreed. Tier 2, everybody agreed. Tier 3, still pretty much agreeing, but starting to fall apart, right? So by the time you get below that, different people have different thoughts about that. And so to that end, people have thoughts.
Do we get to pick?
Sure. I mean, I'm guessing Keith would love custodian.
You would think, but I love
No?
science, and I think the field trip, science field trips would be very important.
Yeah.
Kids.
And that's actually relatively short money.
Yeah, was it how much?
I mean, I don't have that number in my head right now, but I mean, you know, several $1,000s, but not
Isn't
tens
the
of thousands of
PTO?
dollars.
That's what I was going to say, don't we
Doesn't
fund
the
it through the
PTO fund
PTO?
that?
Some of these are expensive field trips. So for instance, marine biology, you know, they like to go to Woods Hole and go out on a boat. And I mean, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me, if you're going to study marine biology for a year, you should probably get to the ocean once, right? And
How many years have we, is this the first year we did?
this is the first year we
And
had.
so there are no field trips?
No, we did one, and I don't know how it was funded. Did kids pay for that? Students paid. All right, students paid.
Sounds more like a day off.
Does it?
Skeptical of
Go
that.
to the beach.
We have science fairs, right, in different elementary schools.
Yeah.
And is there much integration where kids from one school know what the other kids are doing in other schools?
Oh, I don't know if
And
that's-
with the high school, I mean, is there any sharing of ideas that goes on within our system that kids could learn from and benefit from, and teachers could get ideas from?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know that we have a lot of cross-fertilization with science fairs. But so I think that's a good example of something that, you know, teachers are resourceful and they probably will find ways to make that, you know, to make the field trip happen. The question for me becomes, you know, at what point do we have a field trip that's an experience that we think actually really is
Not a
not
day
sort of
off.
enrichment, not, yes, not a day off, not enrichment, but something
But integral to
that's,
the-
yeah,
to the
integral to the curriculum. And at that point, it should be in the operating budget.
I just have a couple of comments. One is, we made a presentation to us about the MCAS scores in November, and we're all fascinated, I think, as a committee about our science in the middle school. And what you presented to us was fascinating because we had been very low compared to our competitive towns. And for this year, we increased massively, and the other towns went down. So I want to congratulate you for the efforts you made and patience to improve the quality and results of that test. So the second thing I think is, in that report, you did point out how, in the term they use in the MCAS is disabled. It's kids, EDs, I think are called disabled, and the statistics are separate. And it shows that they do much more poorly in English, science, and math. And I know when they suddenly get to the 10th grade, they merge so that they're not that far behind. And so one of my questions is, in here, what are we doing if we are focusing on that issue of those kids with regard to, I think it's grades 3 through 8, catching up?
There's a bunch of different actions that are happening, but what I would tell you is by investing in general education, science instruction, and special ed support, that's the recipe we believe is the best, right? But we actually do run even specialized support for MCAS for kids who we've identified who need even more support. And sometimes it's through the special ed process, and sometimes it's hand in hand with general ed. But we're running 3 different boot camps, if you will. This spring, for example, that are targeted to kids for whom that's important. And so Alice and I have already, you know, received proposals and approved them because they're awesome. From just so you know, elementary through high school. So it's not just elementary.
The other thing I want to thank is Allison on your mobile van idea.
I want to give credit to Kate Doyle, who's the elementary
So
science
I
coordinator.
hear this story, and then I read in the Globe where GE is funding a mobile van going to all the middle schools in the city of Boston with support of the Celtics. So, and then they said, and to other schools later. So I'd say maybe we could get in line to come to our middle school. But it also, a lot of these things have struck me that, I don't know if this is feasible, but to set up a grants writing committee at the high school, I'd be happy to help out. That would go after people who would like to invest money in Westwood to study things. And I would think with AutoMile, we could maybe find somebody to donate a van to start your idea. But I think you could go to GE with this idea of transporting ideas and to say, would you fund a Westwood initiative to come up with what would be in a van, what would we transport, and we'll do a prototype that could be used by other school districts. Would you fund that? So I think that there's other things in here that one could go after funding to support an idea that's not reachable yet, just to try it out for a year to see if it would work well. But if you'd be interested in doing that, I'd say we could find other people. The other thing that I've met a number of people in Westwood who are former teachers. They're raising their kids so they're not as active as but they want to go back to teaching. But we might be available for a half a day or sometime. And I don't know if we've ever reached out to see, are there people willing to volunteer for a few hours a week or a part of a day to start to fill in some of these things that we have, who just would be thrilled to help us out. And the skills are there. I don't know if we've ever reached out or looked for that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity with 3,000 kids and parents out there and to help us out in some of these slots that we have. So I don't know if those are worth exploring next year, but I think it would be ways of maybe taking advantage of the resources we have in the town that haven't been used yet. But thank you. It's a wonderful job, I think, of what you put together, and congratulations for all the input you've received and how you've arranged it out.
We do have one slide on the capital budget. Should we have Heath go on to that, or do you want to talk about the operating budget
Well,
before the
are you
capital
gonna have
budget?
comments at the end, or is this a chance to talk?
No, you can
Okay.
talk again.
I wondered if you wanted to talk operating before capital.
Yeah, fine. So, look, I think it was a great job. I really support the new positions, really support the kindergarten fee. I think I'd like to see a double click between now and the next meeting on space at Downey, because I don't want, if you remember what happened last summer, there were 24 students between May and September that showed up at Downey. And so I'm just worried if we don't start thinking now about space. I don't want to be in a situation in August where we say, you know what, we've got 27 first graders. We're going to be using hallways for kids to learn, how to read, okay?
Yeah.
So I would just like to double click on that, like what are the options? Everything, be expansive now, could we put a wall by the reading room? Would that open up space? I'm just throwing these out. There's also, I just be glad to be expansive
Well,
about.
and I want to reassure you, we are thinking
Okay,
about those
great,
things. So,
okay.
For example, the solarium, right? I mean, that would cost money, that would be an expensive fix. I mean, but that's something that we've talked about doing, we could do
Because
it.
that's not really used, is it?
It's used for certain things. I mean, it wasn't designed
Right.
really to be a classroom space, but I mean, there are things that, you could think about doing. I mean, there are other things that you
Yeah.
could do that would be very disruptive to some other programs, but, anything's possible.
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean, I'm just looking at the trend where you've had 2 years straight. I know it's and there's
And
more
it-
condos going in there. I just want to be mindful of the trends, and I don't want to be in a situation
Yeah.
where,
And I appreciate that, and we are thinking about that,
Okay.
and I think that's important. One of the other things that happens, though, is that I don't know, I mean, it could be that the number goes down as
Right.
well, right?
Right.
And so the question becomes sort of how long do you wait before you make a
Yeah.
decision and a choice, and, we'll keep our eye on that ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing we didn't talk about as part of the policy, or for class sizes, is what do we do with special rooms? And do we have a point of view on art in a car, just to use that as an example? And that we didn't opine on that. Different schools have done different philosophies over the last 20 years on that.
And I'm happy
Yeah.
to have that discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually had that discussion with Mrs. Gallagher just today,
Oh,
actually.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, to move music, for instance, to the stage it's not ideal,
Yeah.
but you can do that pretty easily. To move art to the stage, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of materials. You need a sink. You've got to have some place to store the kids' work from week to week. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really.
And I'm not saying we should, I just would like to have that, because I'm guessing at the public hearing, you're going to have a lot of people
Yeah.
talking about this, and I just want to be prepared.
Yeah, I think so.
And not just prepared for the public hearing, but prepared for uncertainty, what happens if 6 more kids show up in first
Right.
grade next
Yeah,
year.
absolutely. I think that's important, and to the extent that I can reassure people, we absolutely are thinking about that, having those conversations, and everything's kind of, cost-benefit
Yeah.
analysis
Yeah.
and thinking about what the impact would be. But yeah. what
So
do you
should
think?
we add that to the policy so that we have some consistency in schools?
I don't know. I mean, we have some schools that right now don't have some of those
Right.
dedicated spaces, right? So it's
Yeah.
really very, very individualized. Yeah.
Why don't you move on to,
Okay.
and then we can, we'll see if we have anything else.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Heath to say a few words about the capital budget now.
Sure. Capital budget for the FY19 is going to be level funded at $867,000, which is actually great news, because I know a lot of committee members remember when the capital budget was $406,000, and that was for about a 10-year period. So for the past few years, the budget's actually grown, and now the town, and we're very thankful for this, the town's able to sustain around 800 to 885 per year. And that gives us an opportunity to really put
So that's the new level. Before, for so long, it was 400, 400, 400.
Yeah.
Now it's about,
now it's about 800, 867. It just gives us more of an opportunity
Right,
to
sure.
put that back into the building and our infrastructure. So So this year, we're going to be asking for $225,000 in technology. That's going to go to the expansion of the one-to-one program down to the 3rd and 4th grade, as well as supporting the continuation of the one-to-one program in the upper grades. In FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, the 129.5 is, there's a long list of things. I'll highlight just a couple. One is the final phase of purchasing the middle school furniture. For the past few years, we've been replacing all the furniture with the middle school, and so this will be the final phase of that. We also have, under FF&E, some custodial equipment, as well as some new outside storage containers for the Hanlon and the Deerfield. Under HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, we're going to start phase 1 of air conditioning the 2nd floor of the middle school. And so we're going to do that piece by piece over the next few years.
How long is it going to take?
Well, we'll see how much, we have 96,000. We're going to see how many rooms we can get done. And see how the budget plays out over the next few
We
years.
sort of are being strategic about where we start, right?
Yes.
Something we heard about on the list before.
Yes. Well, I'm afraid to talk.
Yeah.
We're also going to upgrade the Downey and the high school HVAC control systems and replace the heating pump over at the Sheehan at that point. Yep.
All right.
Upgrade to the back end stuff. Roofing, we're going to put $100,000 aside. As the committee knows, these accounts are what's called revolving accounts, and they get to roll over year to year. And so when we have a chance, we put money aside for roofing, so when a large project comes up, we'll have some funds to fund that project. So we're putting $100,000 aside for that. Under repair and maintenance, which is the largest budget here, is $256,000. This includes, again, probably about 40 different projects, but a few of the projects that I'll highlight include carpeting and other flooring district-wide, paving repairs district-wide, Deerfield Hanlon fire alarm radio box replacement, district security camera upgrade from analog to digital, addition of an ID cards access system to the main entrance and garden entrance at the Deerfield, additional security cameras at the middle school, installation of a push-button handicap access for the main office, guidance, and library at the high school here. Next is copiers. We've been at around 60,000, as you can see, for a few years now. That replaces about 4 copiers a year. We try to keep our copiers 5 to 6 years, about 1 million to 1.5 million copies before we turn them over. What's not included in this budget, though, is the replacement of the middle school elevator, which the town has agreed to fund outside this capital budget, which is wonderful. It's about a $170,000 project. It's time to redo that elevator. It's about 30, 40 years old at this point. So, and that's it.
Do we have an elevator at the Sheehan School that's not working?
No, we don't have an elevator at the Sheehan School.
No?
This
You
may
said the
not,
middle school, what was 107 or 170?
170. It replaces the car and all the pneumatics and repairs the shaft.
the only reason I'm raising this came up with PTO meeting yesterday. Water filtration, are we comfortable that we have adequate in all the elementary, middle, and high school? That we have enough water for people to drink?
The bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Is that in the budget at all? Are there any
Well,
To
schools?
add some,
Yeah,
right?
there's one in this
Okay.
line of things.
Okay.
I forget what school's getting it, but we typically put those in like during the year. but
Okay.
I think we added a few this year.
Okay, it just came.
What else do those cost? You don't know.
They're about 2,000.
But they asked if it was in the budget.
Yeah, well, they only have one at first, and then they wanted.
Oh, a second.
Yeah.
We can look into that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
Just like.
Okay.
This
That's
is
it.
it.
So do we have any more discussion at this point? Does anyone have anything they want to bring up in terms of the budget? And part of the reason for asking is we had scheduled in case another meeting late in this month. If we don't need that meeting,
I think this was a really very well prepared budget and very easily understood.
Well, I think it's been helpful. I feel like we've been talking all along,
Yeah.
so I'm hoping that it wasn't a big surprise to see what was in the budget.
What would be the date of the one in February? Is it close?
No, this was an extra one in
Right.
January that we were
Right.
gonna do.
Right.
So we could take that off, and then the February,
February 15th, I think, it would be the budget hearing, right?
right.
And is that where we vote the budget? Right. Okay.
That's an opportunity, well, actually, that's my last slide right here. I will be sending the executive summary of the budget out through the listserv for parents tomorrow. All of our budget documents, I mean, you know, every detail, every spreadsheet will be posted on the district website so that people can pore over it if they are so inclined. And then the February school committee meeting is typically the budget hearing, so that's an opportunity for public participation. And if anyone has any questions, they certainly are welcome to contact me, or I would assume members of the committee.
So does anyone have any objection to us putting off we don't need that extra January meeting, right? Okay, so we'll be back in February. Great. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. All right, moving on to action items. So the approval of the minutes from our December 14th meeting.
I'll make a motion to.
Okay, do we have a second? Is there any discussion? No, all in favor, approving the minutes? Excellent. All right, the next is acceptance of the donation from MEDITECH. So this was for our laptops?
No, so we're very fortunate that
Technology.
MEDITECH annually gives us a wonderful donation. So they've donated $15,000 to the Westwood Public Schools, and it's to be used at the district's discretion for the advancement of technology and technology instruction. And so I included in your packet the letter from MEDITECH, and then also the letter that Steve Lett, our Director of Technology, Learning, and Innovation, sent to them to thank them for that donation. But the school committee would need to vote to accept
We have to
it.
vote to accept money, folks. You ready? All right, can I have a motion?
Approved.
Charlie's already
Motion
approved.
to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, because I know there's no discussion. Excellent.
Also,
Okay.
Emily, could we maybe get an article in the newspaper to thank them for some
Yeah.
publicity?
Sure.
Maybe give an idea to other companies
Right.
that.
And I think we should also give a special shout out to Howard Messing.
Yes.
Who is a resident of town and is on the FinCom and really is a great supporter of the Westwood schools.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, MEDITECH, that's fantastic. Okay, next, approval of the out-of-state trip, the Yale Interscholastic Track Classic for the girls' track team.
Yeah, so this isn't the whole team going,
Just the girls.
this is 2 members of the high school girls'
Okay.
track team. So my sense is that this is, you know, you have to qualify for this
Right.
particular meet.
Okay.
And so this is a proposal asking for permission for their coach to take these 2 students to Yale to participate. And it would require an overnight stay on January 19th. The hotel costs are going to be covered by the Westwood High School boosters.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Is there any discussion on this?
Who's the coach?
Gentian?
And the parents go too?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Do you know that?
Not aware of it.
I don't think they do, so I'm thinking of like our hockey.
Sorry,
coach.
I just got something from Gentine today. It's a Debbie Conant, who is Sarah's mom, one of the runners. And Christy Harrison and Miss Tien will be there on the
There
trip.
you go. So one of the parents is.
One of the parents.
Great.
Okay.
To answer your question, for
Yeah.
hockey, the parents always go.
Do they?
They travel
Is it
in
a big,
packs. It's a
big
big deal.
event?
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
well,
Just anyway,
Good.
just FYI.
good to know.
Okay, that's it for action
We
items.
have voted on.
Oh, I'm sorry, oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
All right, how about we vote on this? Do I have a motion to approve this trip?
The motion was made, I think we got
Motion,
to.
second, discussion.
Second.
I threw
Oh,
it
sorry.
off by discussing it. Sorry.
Right, I'm so sorry. Long day. All right, how about we just vote? Yes,
Yes.
that's where we are. Everyone's in favor. Go to Yale, that's great. Okay. All right, new business. This is an opportunity, should anyone on the committee so choose, to talk about or bring back anything from any of your PTO meetings, or any of the task forces, any of the hiring, any of the budget steering, any of the meetings we go to, any of the groups we're liaisons to. Anybody have anything that they want to bring up that?
I agree with the one. You know, I don't know if there's any budgetary impact, but, you know, I assume, given the Boston Public Schools' recent experience, we're off this changing the time thing, Tony? We're not? Okay. We're off that?
I don't know, off it. The research is pretty clear, Brian.
Yeah.
What's best for the kids, but we can talk about that another time.
I'd just like to
Sounds
comment
good.
on the special, that's a notice of that, right when you left, Carol, the announcement of the program coming up.
Yes.
But the
That-
recent meeting, I was unaware of all this. I just pointed out to the committee that there's a parent's notice of procedural safeguards that it basically is the federal and state law, how kids are, first of all, a prior written notice a parent gets if their child is thought to need some kind of special ed, and the parent's consent, an independent education evaluation in disputes, if you don't agree. It's a very complicated thing, and it goes on every day, and there's hundreds of Westwood teachers and people working with the students. So this is all brand new to me, and I think it was an excellent opportunity for the parents to come and hear a discussion on a presentation of this, how they can apply for Mass Health to help pay for all these extra things that are on autism. So if anyone's interested, we can get a copy of this
On the website.
on the website. But it's a very interesting process that has been set up that is trying to. And the bottom line of it is that the requirement is that kids with special ed have to be taught like regular kids in a regular class, and then get an addition of that, but not off by themselves all the time. And how she advised the parents, when you meet for the first time with the committee, that you need to develop a vision of what you want the kid to do. You want to go to college and the service, and what your concerns are as you regularly meet. So it was a wonderful opportunity for the new parents who have never been through this, the older parents telling them, and it's a wonderful program, and we have people here tonight who organized it and set it up, and also it's a privilege for me to sit there and participate and learn. But anybody have an interest, those are things you might want to look into.
Great. All right, at this point, we are not going to adjourn the meeting. We're just going to adjourn to executive session. So,
You need a motion to move to executive session.
Make a motion to adjourn.
second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?